Formula One is exploding, and this time, it's coming from inside the paddock. The drivers, the teams, even the engineers, are all pointing at the same thing. The 2026 rules are breaking the sport. Verstappen says it doesn't feel like Formula One. Hamilton says it's too complex for anyone to follow. Alonso says the driver doesn't even matter anymore. That's not criticism. That's a collapse in confidence. And it's happening because of something that should never exist in this sport. Cars are now slowing down, on full throttle, on the straight, losing up to 50 kilometers per hour, with zero warning. And when one car loses that speed, and another doesn't, the difference can explode past 40 kilometers per hour, instantly. That's not racing. That's a ticking time bomb. It already caused a near disaster that proved every single warning the drivers made. And now, the FIA is in emergency meetings. 6 different solutions are already being debated, just to save the season. But here's the part that changes everything. This wasn't a mistake discovered too late. This was predicted. The drivers said it. Before the season even began. They explained exactly what would happen. And they were ignored. So now there's only one question left. Did Formula One just create a problem so big, it's tearing the entire sport apart from within? At the beginning, it didn't feel like a meltdown. It felt like a revolution. A smarter Formula One. Cleaner. More efficient. Built for the future. That was the vision. An engine split perfectly in half. 50% electric power. 50% combustion. A bold idea that promised to redefine the sport. And on paper, it was perfect. Balanced numbers. Clear philosophy. A future manufacturers could believe in. But Formula One is not built on paper. It's built on reality. On track. At full speed. With drivers pushing to the absolute limit. And that's where everything started to collapse. Because while the electric power was massively increased, the battery wasn't. It stayed exactly the same. Same capacity. Same limits. But now, under extreme demand. That single decision created the biggest flaw in modern Formula One. Because it means the system cannot sustain full performance. At maximum deployment, the battery drains in seconds. 8 to 10 seconds, and it's gone. Completely empty. And when that happens, the car changes instantly. Not gradually. Not predictably. Instantly. The system switches from delivering power to recovering energy. Even if the driver is still flat on the throttle. That moment is where Formula One stops behaving like Formula One. Because from that point on, the driver is no longer fully in control. The system takes over. And that creates something the sport has never seen before. Unpredictable performance in the middle of a straight. Think about that. A driver is pushing at maximum speed. And suddenly, the car stops accelerating the way it should. Not because of skill. Not because of setup. Because the energy is gone. And now the car is trying to recharge itself, while still racing. That's the core of the crisis. But here's where it becomes even more unsettling. Drivers are already adapting. Not by going faster, but by going slower. They're lifting off early. On straights. Before the braking zone. Not to defend. Not to attack. But to recharge the battery, before the system forces them to slow down even more. So they slow down, to avoid being slowed down harder later. That contradiction is the clearest proof something is fundamentally broken. And it changes everything. Because this is no longer about pushing to the edge. It's about managing limitations. Managing energy. Managing timing. Managing something invisible, but decisive. And when that happens, the essence of Formula One starts to disappear. But this is still only the beginning. Because everything becomes far more dangerous the moment another car enters the picture. Everything changes the moment another car appears. Because this system doesn't just fail. It creates chaos between drivers. One car exits a corner with a full battery. Another exits with almost nothing left. Same lap. Same track. Completely different performance. At first, it looks normal. Both cars accelerate. Both drivers commit. But then, everything breaks. One car keeps pulling. The other suddenly stops gaining speed. Not gradually. Instantly. That's super clipping. And in that exact moment, the gap between them doesn't just grow. It explodes. We're talking about differences of 40, even 50 kilometers per hour, in seconds. Now imagine you're the driver behind. Flat out. Focused. Everything feels under control. Until suddenly, it isn't. The car in front is slower than expected. Much slower. And there is no warning. No signal. No pattern. No way to predict it. Just a car, losing speed where it should be fastest. That's not racing. That's survival. And this is exactly what turned frustration into a paddock meltdown. Because this already happened. Japan. A car ahead suddenly lost around 30 to 40 kilometers per hour, almost instantly. Another car arrived at full speed. The closing gap was massive. There was almost no time to react. The driver behind had to move offline. Avoid contact. By meters. Just meters. And that moment changed everything. Because now, this isn't a theory. This is reality. This is the danger the drivers warned about. Not just performance issues. Safety. Because this is the part the FIA didn't fully understand. Not how the system works alone, but how it behaves in real racing. In traffic. In battles. At full speed. Because Formula One is not about driving alone. It's about fighting. Wheel to wheel. Corner to corner. And that requires one critical element. Trust. Drivers push to the limit because they trust the car. They trust the response. They trust the speed. They trust what happens when they go flat out. But now, that trust is gone. Because the car can change behavior without warning. Not based on skill. Not based on input. Based on energy. Invisible. Unpredictable. Constantly changing. And when that trust disappears, everything becomes dangerous. Drivers hesitate. Or worse, they commit and the car does something unexpected. That's when mistakes happen. That's when accidents happen. And that's when the sport crosses a line it should never cross. But here's what makes this even bigger. This wasn't unexpected. The drivers saw it coming. They warned about it before the season even started. They explained exactly this scenario. And still, nothing changed. Which is why the reaction now is different. This isn't just frustration. This is anger. Because the drivers are not just dealing with a flawed system. They are dealing with a system that they were forced to race after warning it was dangerous. And now there's a question no one inside Formula One can ignore anymore. If the drivers don't trust the cars, how long before the entire sport starts losing control? The FIA had no choice. Not anymore. Not after the data. Not after the near disaster. Not after every driver said the same thing. So everything changed. Fast. Emergency meetings were called. Engine manufacturers were pulled in. Teams were forced to bring solutions, not opinions. And for the first time, the FIA stopped defending the rules and started trying to contain them. That shift says everything. Because Formula One doesn't move like that unless something is already out of control. Now there are 6 different solutions on the table. 6 different ways to try and save the season. But here's the problem. None of them fix the real issue. Every single one is a compromise. One of the most urgent fixes targets something very specific. Why drivers are lifting off on the straight. Right now, lifting gives the car more energy recovery than staying flat on the throttle. Which means drivers are being rewarded for going slower. So the solution is simple. Make energy recovery equal, whether the driver lifts or not. Remove the advantage. Remove the behavior. Make the straights feel like Formula One again. But even that doesn't solve everything. Because super clipping still exists. It just becomes less aggressive. Another solution goes deeper. Reduce the electric power when the battery gets too low. Stretch the energy. Avoid the sudden drop in speed. Make everything more predictable. But again, there's a cost. Less power. Less acceleration. Less of that brutal intensity that defines Formula One. And suddenly, the entire debate changes. Because now the question isn't how to make the cars faster. It's how to make them safer. And that shift changes everything. Because once safety becomes the priority, it means performance has already failed. And that's why Formula One is in serious trouble. Not just because something is broken, but because fixing it changes what the sport is supposed to be. Make it safer, and it becomes slower. Keep it fast, and it stays unpredictable. There is no perfect solution, only trade-offs. And here's the hardest truth of all. This cannot be fully fixed this year. Because the real problem is built into the design itself. The batteries are too small. The power demand is too high. That balance is locked. And you cannot rebuild that in the middle of a season. So what happens now? The championship continues. With patches. With temporary fixes. With small adjustments trying to control a massive flaw. Which means every race from this point forward is not just competition. It's an experiment. Drivers adapting. Teams reacting. The FIA trying to stay ahead of something that is already ahead of them. And that leads to the question no one inside the sport wants to answer. Is the FIA still controlling Formula One? Or is Formula One now reacting to a mistake that was too big to fix from the start? And this is where the crisis becomes something much bigger. Because now, it's not just about what's happening on track. It's about what Formula One is becoming. Behind closed doors, the conversation has already changed. Quietly, but completely. This is no longer about fixing 2026. It's about escaping it. Teams are no longer asking how to make these cars faster. They're asking how to make sure this never happens again. Because once drivers lose trust, everything starts to collapse. And that's exactly what's happening. Drivers don't trust how the car will behave on a straight. They don't trust what happens mid-corner. They don't trust the system controlling the car beneath them. And when the driver loses trust, the sport loses its foundation. Because Formula One has always been built on one idea: the driver pushing the machine to the absolute limit. But now, the limit is not defined by the driver. It's defined by energy, by software, by a system that can override everything without warning. And that changes the identity of the sport. Because this is no longer pure racing. It's controlled performance, managed speed, calculated risk instead of instinct. And fans are starting to feel it. They're seeing cars lift on straights. They're seeing speed disappear without explanation. They're hearing drivers talk about battery levels instead of racing lines. And once that perception settles, it's very hard to reverse. Because Formula One depends on belief. The belief that what you're watching is the fastest, most extreme form of racing in the world. But if that belief breaks, even slightly, the damage goes far beyond one season. And that's why everything now points to one moment: 2027. Not as an upgrade, as a reset. A complete reset. Because the lesson from this crisis is now impossible to ignore. If you increase electric power, the battery must increase with it. If systems become more complex, they must remain predictable. And most importantly, the driver must always stay in control. Because the moment the system overrides the driver, Formula One stops being Formula One. But here's the final piece. The one everything has been building toward. Even if 2027 fixes everything, even if the cars become predictable again, even if the drivers regain full control, there is one question that won't disappear. How did this happen in the first place? Because this wasn't hidden. The data existed. The warnings were clear. The drivers said it early. And still, nothing changed. Which means the real problem is not just the regulation. It's the process behind it. The decisions that allowed it. The system that approved it. And if that doesn't change, then this won't be the last crisis. It will just be the first. And that leads to the final question. Not about this season. Not about these rules. About the future of Formula One itself. Is the sport still in control of where it's going? Or has it already crossed a line where even the best drivers in the world no longer recognize the cars they're driving?